Hi, this is Sandy with SDS Digital and the Accord Sequarallel. In this playbook, number 3, we'll look at block transposing in the playlist and how to use the same track's tracker sequence to get what we want with said transposing of notes. If you have a minor sequence, meaning following a minor scale, or a dissonant sequence, perhaps you will need to obtain a resolution after a few loops into a major or a more consonant series of notes. The problem is, transpose just adds or subtracts from the notes by the same amount. So minors stay minors, and majors stay majors. I'll demonstrate with this track sequence. Inversely, the sequence is in major. This set above the single block has playlist transposes applied. But here's a manual shifting of our playing block. 12 is centered. The range is 0, 1 octave down, and 24, 1 octave up. Now here's the transpose sequence above. It's just a major progression moving around. This is way too happy. We need some minors. The group at the top has some. It's the exact same transpose sequence, but with these playlist effects added, P1 and P2. P1 is calling a change to the track scale to turn off, whereas P2 is calling track scale to change to user scale number 1. The order is major, minor, more or less. Let's freeze play on the second block from out here. In the user 1 scale, you can see that C is masked. This causes an apparent shift of the key up 1 semitone, thus any transposes in the playlist must be 1 lower. Certain notes have been opted out to get what I wanted, and C was one of them. So user scale 1 has been optimized to remove offensive notes and let them move to the nearest unmasked note. So PLFX 2 can be seen here, which modifies the track scale to user 1. PLFX 1 returns the scale to off. It also turns off a microarp step 2 modification, which I'll show in a bit. You're probably asking, why not just use the present major and minor scales? The reason is avoiding the cookie cutter trap of these scale quantizers, thus allowing odd notes that may be in runs or a less offensive high sparkle to go out of the norm. Also, the scales are to C. What if the key is A or E, or changes in the sequence? Now back to the all majors set of blocks. Notice the last block has a variation. This is because of a microarp change in the track's note effects by PLFX 3. Here it is. I'll freeze play on that block. So in tracks, in the note effects for the bass guitar type voice, which is on the first lane as this is sending MPE zone 0 for MIDI, there's a modification to the second step of the microarp. PLFX sets it to -2, only on the 4th playlist block. The chop or ratchet is set to 2, with a bit of a curve to give it a fingered sound, not perfectly aligned. The top note in lane 1 has something similar, but relying on the note effects mask, which you may have noticed is going on and off in every cycle. How's that for cool? So both of these could be used from the jump to, but they are quite different from one another. In the second part, I'll take you through recording in a song that I made on the DAW in FL Studio, making loop points, then adding some SongFX. After arming the Sequarallel to record a song by hitting both buttons together, hit play on the software. The 2 LEDs will stop flashing to confirm recording start. To get perfect clock sync, make sure the DAW software is sending a MIDI clock, and make sure there isn't a modular clock still patched in. There's a few tricks to using a minimum amount of memory, one being to limit DAW automations, sending tons of CC data. I drew this automation quantized rather than a smooth ramp, for example. It's a cut frequency and my synth smooths that anyways. The Sequarallel can smooth CCCV outputs for the same reason, if it's going to go through there, to minimize load on the MIDI pipeline. Of course, you can have a smooth transition where it's needed, like pitch control, but too many of them will use a lot of memory and leave less room for layers, should that space be required. I purposely haven't added any Note 121 markers to create loops in this project, so we can create them after. As I mentioned before, loop markers weren't placed in the song. Now we'll need a clock input. A MIDI clock could also be used. So let's make some loops. This can be a time-intense task, so I'll try to whiz through it. The first thing is to figure out the loop sizes you want. So, under the loop quick box, I've already added one loop, but it needs to be adjusted. Default size is normally 4 bars, but it will update once changed. So now the rest will start as 8-bar loops. Unless you know the loops beforehand, off by heart, it's nice to audition them while still playing. Selecting or adjusting the loop start bar number will jump play to that point, so it can be heard right away. See, it smoothly moves to the selected loop point. That's a good point. Most of the time, I just do 4-bar loops, but that divides up the phrase in this song. Some loops are identical, so could be 8 bars, then 4 bars twice on the next. Here's the drop. This must be jumped over as drops sort of lose their appeal when looped. It's 2 bars long, so 27. Just a mention on CC automations. Sometimes you must be careful with the way loops are played, as CC modifiers from one loop could affect following loops, not in order, in an unexpected way. A good example with this song is that drop and an attack CC increase to smooth out the cymbals during the build. If play is stopped midway or a forced jump is executed before the attack CC is reset in the loop, or the loop is only 1 bar, then the drums, being very attack-oriented, will almost disappear. Of course, that might be an interesting new effect too. It's just good to know that. So this 8-bar loop's second half is really quite different, so maybe dividing it into 2 4-bar loops would be better. Once released from auditioning, play will return where it would have been in the song. When created initially, each song loop has a corresponding SongFX number assigned to it. So 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, etc. Each SongFX is created by copying the one previous, so if the first song effect already had modifiers tweaked, then those tweaks would be reproduced for all the following ones. They're done. So now looking in the playlist, we can see all of our loops conveniently placed, mostly for reference. We could do a fill 50 and an insert to move them all down, but I'll just leave them here so they align as jump 2 coordinates. 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. In the jump 2 quick box, we are using rows, not groups, and have the kill last turned on so it will jump immediately. So next, let's find a loop to modify with different SongFX numbers. Loop 4 has the drop. Turning loop on will keep play within the loop. Here's what I was talking about with mining CCs getting changed in a loop. Notice now there's no drums here? There should be. It's because the attack CC is still set to long attack from the drop in loop 4, but the reset doesn't happen until the second bar where the snare plays, and didn't have a chance to play because we jumped out of it at the beginning of the second bar. Turning off loop lets it play through, and drums are back. So in the playlist, let's add a group of the same block to try different song effects on them. Set jump to groups so we can restart it. In SongFX, let's start tweaking. Swing is always a good way to change a loop. Scale will completely change a melody. Limiting the notes so we can use the +1 octave in the subsequencer. Quantizing makes the swing more trim. Length spaces them out for a more staccato sound. Into the subsequencer. Add an octave on highlighted steps. Drop velocities on unhighlighted steps. 6-step cycle. And notes shorter on highlighted steps. Okay, and re-triggering, although it won't make much difference with the notes shortened and quantized, one would think. Well, it is making a big difference on the drums. They align here. The swing makes the effects move shifting trickier. 23 will advance them slightly. Transposing down one brings it back to the original key after the scale modification. I'll be doing the SongFX 2 and 3, so if you want to skip ahead to 2240, I'll understand. so I have left the last block for contrast. After using SongFX 1, 2, and 3 for those, loops 1, 2, and 3 can use SongFX 11 if they need to play as before. All fixed. Thanks for watching.